And we're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is the 11 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center regarding the track and intensity of Michael. Well, Michael is just a mile per hour shy of being a Category 3 hurricane. It's showing great structure right now, good outflow. It's still exhibiting a little bit of impact from slightly hostile winds, shear we call it, but that is forecast by all computer models to kind of decrease over the course of the next few hours, and it's moving over some of the warmest water on the earth, so I think that it's a pretty good bet that this system is going to become a major hurricane before the end of the day. Category 2 storm, 110 mile per hour intensity right now, wind speeds, and moving to the north at 12 miles an hour, so a pretty good clip. Forecast to continue on a track that takes it to a Category 3 by later today, and then we'll move up toward the coastline, up toward Panama City by tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening, and at that speed and intensity should produce quite a storm surge for the northern Gulf Coast. It's going to be a very bad situation, particularly for this area of the Big Bend region. I think they're going to see some very large storm surge in excess of 10, 12 feet because of the concave nature and the very tight concave nature of that coastline. It's really going to collect the water and give it very little places to go. Plus, there are all kinds of little tributaries up here and little streams and freshwater creeks and such that water is going to be just pushed back up into those things and create a storm surge that goes a pretty good distance inland. For us, we are probably looking at the closest pass of this storm to occur later tonight and into tomorrow morning. That's when our wind speeds will be picking up. The storm then exits pretty rapidly off the coastline of the mid-Atlantic by about Friday. And as that happens, our weather will actually improve. We'll start to dry out just a little bit. Our winds will shift to the north and some slightly drier air will move in, which will allow for some cooler temperatures during the nighttime, particularly as we head into the weekend. So we might see some interior sections drop into the 60s as we head into the weekend for nighttime lows. That'll be kind of nice. Well, here's the visible satellite imagery, and clearly a nicely defined eye wall beginning to form here. Still a good distance away from us, almost 300 miles, and on a forecast track that's verifying quite nicely, the eye moving off to the north and to the northwest. We are looking at a system, as we go into visible imagery, that clearly has a well-defined eye wall right here. It has pretty good outflow in all areas, except you can kind of notice a little bit of a lopsidedness with the cloud cover on this side versus the cloud cover on this side. That's because it's still getting some of that shear that I talked about that is inhibiting it perhaps a little bit, but that will probably decrease as it heads north, and we'll start to see a much more symmetric kind of a presentation from the storm in the satellite views. One thing of interest is you see these explosions of storms out here in some of the feeder bands of the storm. These are the storms that we'll be watching tomorrow, those kinds of storms rather, as they move closer to us. They could bring perhaps the threat of some severe weather, short-lived tornadoes, and maybe some brief downpours of rain. One limiting factor also with this storm system during the overnight has been the intrusion of a little bit of drier air, perhaps, which made for a kind of ragged eye wall. It now looks as though this system is perhaps creating its own environment, if you will, which sometimes happens in stronger storms, such that the dry air is being reduced as the moist air pulled up from the sea surface by the showers and thunderstorms associated with the storm itself create its own wet environment to survive in. So another reason why it might strengthen. So we're looking at some sea surface heights here that are pretty impressive. Around the center of the storm, this computer model suggests some maybe as high as 30 foot wave heights associated with the eye of the storm, and they propagate outward toward us. So overnight tonight, we're going to get some pretty good wave heights, I think, near the coastline, maybe some 10-foot wave heights by dawn tomorrow morning, which suggests that if you have a boat, now is the time to secure that vessel in your investment and protect other boats around you by making sure that it's good and safe and tied in securely and able to receive that kind of wave action along the coastline. Beach erosion is a possibility here as well. We do still have some watches and warnings up. Currently, we are still under a tropical storm watch from Inglewood northward, as well as a storm surge watch in the mouth of Tampa Bay. Forecast a 2 to 4 foot storm surge possible in the area, especially around the sounds, Anna Maria Sound and some of the inlets on Longboat Key. The potential there exists for some higher storm surge inundation. However, some of the latest what we call P-surge models, which is the probability of storm inundation waters, is showing perhaps a slight decrease in the original numbers that we forecast. So perhaps these numbers will come down over the next 24 hours as we get a clearer idea of the strength of the storm and its direction of motion. That would be nice if that occurred. Of course, we'll be watching that very carefully. 1 to 2 feet is what's suggested down here. That shouldn't be inches. That should be feet. 1 to 2 feet along the coastline south of us as well could lead to some beach erosion and such. Wind speed should keep tropical storm force off the coast, but there still is a possibility that that won't be the case, that we could get some tropical storm force winds along areas, especially Anna Maria Island and the coast of Manatee County. But that chance is low. And it's getting lower over the last 24 hours. So a forecast wind speed tonight through tomorrow morning, possibly anywhere in the vicinity of 20, 25 miles per hour, with some gusts higher than that right along Anna Maria Island, Holmes Beach, and points around Tampa Bay. That's possible. A little bit further to the south and inland, maybe 15 to 25 mile per hour winds possible. So wind speeds are not as great an issue as the potential for some isolated tornadoes and the wave height, the wave action along the coastline. That could lead to some beach erosion and some possible flooding issues. We're also watching the feeder bands from the storm kind of getting closer to us, inching a little bit closer. Today, not a large chance for rain showers. We're kind of on the sinking air side of this. We get some east winds, maybe bringing in a shower or two later on today. 30-40% chance of showers later this evening. 60% chance by the time you wake up tomorrow, and eventually a 90% chance that some of those rain bands come on shore tomorrow.
Couple questions. One person wanted to know about travel. If they're flying in and out of our area, when is their best day for that? Is there any chance of cancellations, do you think?
I think there certainly is a chance of cancellations, especially in the Tampa airport. Sarasota airport, I have not heard of cancellations yet, but there may be. They may choose to do that. Certainly, the chances of flying out of here on Thursday and Friday are much better than they are tomorrow.
Okay. And of course, we had a question about red tide. One person wanted to know if the storm will break the red tide up.
Well, that's a very popular question, actually. It's been asked several times by many people around here. And I do not claim to be an expert in physical meteorology or physical oceanography or marine biology, but from what I have read and from what I understand, there is no definitive case study that has shown that a hurricane or tropical storm has been linked to the breakup of a red tide. It stands to reason that if you can dilute the number of red tide organisms in the water by bringing in fresh, uninfected waters, you're going to, if you can exceed the creation rate of the red tide cells by diluting them, then you're going to get rid of the red tide. So the question is whether or not we'd be able to do that. There are conflicting studies in this regard. Heavy rainfall has been shown in the past to raise the water table underneath of the Gulf, which releases nutrients that feed red tide organisms. Also, runoff increases, which feeds red tide organisms. They've also shown that an easterly wind can create upwelling that releases nutrients and feeds red tide organisms. On the other hand, if you can get some of the water that is in the Gulf, in the offshore waters, to come inshore with maybe a little bit of a surge, you might be able to dilute some of the red tide. On the other hand, that wind flow coming out of the southwest pushes those red tide toxins closer to our shore. So I think it's kind of a wait and see thing, and I think Moat Marine can handle that question better than I can.
Okay. Another question about driving. One person wanted to know about potential skyway closures with high winds, and if it would be. Some person wanted to specifically know if they were driving to North Carolina on Thursday. Driving conditions on those days.
Yeah, Thursday could still be a little bit windy, particularly how far north you've gotten by that time, because the storm system will be moving off the coast and be in the Carolinas by Thursday and into Friday. There will be a cold front moving through here that will start to decrease those winds as you get into, especially Friday. So, I mean, if you could delay your departure till Friday, that would be an excellent thing to do. Plus, tomorrow there's going to be a lot of rain showers along the coastline, heavy rain at times, and obviously some strong winds. So leaving tomorrow is definitely not a good idea. If you had to leave this work week, Thursday would be better. Friday would be best.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Okay.